So this is the part A of the streaming program called Khoodeelaar television channel. This is being broadcast only on the internet, only online. And it's being broadcast from London within quotation marks, UK, on Sunday the 3rd of October 2021. Now, as you can see, this is called the Justice for Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And we are incorporating in these editions appropriate extensive updates on Sarah EVERARD and SABINA NESSA. We call this program World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now, every word is meant literally and evidentially and ethically and morally and transparently. Now, this is a latest kind of heading which says that the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal in Badland, England, is going to kind of fail to provide the necessary services and facilities for the people that have got used to, accustomed to these facilities called Christmas. And this is in complete contradiction to the depraved, that is deranged, depraved, diseased, sick George Eustace Injustice, the criminal who has been denying the existence of a crisis. Now, we invite the criminal, George Injustice, to deny this on the record by providing evidence that he is not a liar, that he is not a depraved, degenerate, evil-doing criminal who has been engaged in perpetrating serial lies against the baby angel Geronimo. This criminal is, of course, a member of the so-called cabinet, fronted by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. We invite both of those liars to deny that they have been lying against the perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. For their parts, they have been lying for the duration of the time that they have been in so-called government. And they have been perpetuating the lies that were perpetrated and perpetuated by the depraved DEFRA when Theresa May was in place, incumbent as the congenital liar Johnson is now. Now, here is the other parallel, contemporaneous kind of proof that contrary to the lies of the depraved DEFRA and the criminal George Injustice Eustace, that they care about people. This is a betrayal. This is not the first item, nor is it going to be the last item about Afghanistan, but this is the betrayal described by a very patriotic British kind of person. Or persons. He said more than 3,000 female Afghan soldiers and police trained by the US and the UK are at risk of torture, jail, and death. George Eustace, injustice, depraved DEFRA have been plotting all these crimes against innocent beings, including and as symbolized, embodied, and personified and represented by the world's most beloved and healthiest baby angel, Geronimo. So this is the government that has been this lying government fronted by Boris Johnson that has been betraying the most deserving, the healthiest being, baby angel Geronimo, and by extension, less known beings. So this is the tip of the iceberg. This is on page 2 of the Sunday People. But this is the tip of the iceberg. That is to say, the number of people betrayed by the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal is many times that of 3,000 Afghans, women troops. And here is the corona crisis, and then care homes, Xmas crisis on the pages 2 pages 4 and 5 of the Sunday People. And remember, the Sunday People is edited by a complete racist liar. But the liar gets into patriotic mode when it comes to peddling, repeating the lies of the conservatives. And even such a patriotic, pro-conservative criminal like Nigel Nelson cannot hide and cannot cover up and cannot deny the failures of the corrupt, congenital liar Boris Johnson-fronted cabal. And then there are 2 pages of the what this calls the toxic police culture. It says toxic police culture allowed Sarah Killer to wear uniform. I mean, that is not true. Toxic doesn't begin to tell the truth about the disappearing police. Now, we shall come to the Mail on Sunday, where we shall look at the opinion of the token dissenter, younger brother of the late Christopher Hitchens, Peter Hitchens. Now, Hitchens is saying that the police should be scrapped. He's not talking about the sacking of Cressida Dick etc. Now, anyone watching this program, not this edition, of course, but anyone watching the previous editions, long before Sarah Everard was kidnapped, raped, and murdered, would know and can find that about the police, we have been saying that the police needs to be completely replaced. This is our world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And by Fleet Street, we mean the parliament, the so-called government in the UK. And contextually, by extension, extrapolation, we of course also diagnose the state of the so-called democracy in the USA, North America, and Canada, and in Western Europe. And of course, by extension and extrapolation, the two countries, New Zealand and Australia, are included because of the racist history. The point about our saying that the police have not been reviewed ever since the police was established in this country. Effectively, what we have said is that police no longer exists. Policing does not exist and has not existed for a very long time in this country. Now, it has taken as long for Peter Hitchens to opine that the policing should be scrapped. Now, in between Peter Hitchens and our own long-ranging analysis, world-exclusive analysis about the police and the society and parliament and government and, of course, Fleet Street and the academies, the universities and other so-called educational institutions in this country. These are the traders. These are educational business. In between Peter Hitchens realizing now and what we have been saying for years, not on this particular format, because this format we adopted or we accepted or allowed to become part of our broadcasting or publishing only a year, just over a year ago. So in between Peter Hitchens and what we have been saying about the police, there are serious gaps, like the political murder of the Labour Party by the criminal, liar, selfish crook, Keir Starmer. Starmer should have said something, not necessarily what Peter Hitchens is saying, but Starmer should have said something truthful about the murders of Sarah Everard and SABINA NESSA in the week that has gone. Because this crook, the liar, scum, Keir Starmer, has politically murdered the Labour Party. And he was in Brighton. I'm sure he was followed around as a shadow by the other criminal and crook, Neil Kinnock. Kinnock put paid to the founding values and democratic values and the roles that the Labour Party had been founded for. Kinnock destroyed the Labour Party to the extent that he could destroy. I mean, these are people that I'm talking about whose criminality and lying I have personal first-hand experience about. I have discussed those in previous editions. I don't have to repeat those. But suffice to say that I would not say anything. I would not call them a liar and a criminal and a crook and a racist unless I had seen evidence that more than justified my calling them liars, crooks, and criminals. And as I said about Neil Kinnock, Neil Kinnock was the crook that destroyed the Labour Party in the 1980s. And Kinnock was followed by John Smith, who unfortunately didn't have the chance to show his politics as he fell ill and passed away, thus allowing the post of the leader of the Labour Party to be hijacked by Tony Blair. So what we have in the middle, that is Peter Hitchens today saying in the Mail and Scum Day that the police should be scrapped altogether. And our saying over the last many years that the police didn't exist, that police had already been scrapped by the police. So there is the middle opportunity in the middle between Hitchens saying this today, what he's saying today, and we shall elaborate on that in this edition, and our saying more extensive, detailed, factual, evidential things about the fact, the evidence that the police themselves had abolished the police. So if Keir Starmer was politically alive, he would have said something at Brighton the last week that actually dealt with our diagnostic finding that the police had destroyed, scrapped the police altogether. And what he should have been able to anticipate, somebody, not necessarily Peter Hitchens, but somebody saying something that is fundamental as scrapping the police. Now, Starmer didn't say that because Starmer doesn't politically exist, and he has every affinity and identity with this non-existence because he had already murdered the Labour Party. So the Labour Party doesn't exist. Politically, Keir Starmer doesn't exist. And there is no other political kind of platform or unit or outlet or outfit that can be mentioned in the context of the vacuum in the bad land, in the evil land, where the likes of the evil-doing George Eustace appear on British media denying that there is a crisis. Now, here is the Sunday Times that is talking about Sarah Everard. Now, Sarah Everard, of course, was murdered in March. She was kidnapped, she was raped, and she was murdered. Now, anyone care to go back and look at what we said at the time? We said she must have been raped as well. Now, none of the Fleet Street outlets, none of the British media or any media in the Western Hemisphere or any media elsewhere that we can identify said anything like what we had said. So that was, and that remains, world exclusive, diagnosis on our part of Fleet Street. Because the Fleet Street papers, despite the fact that the Sunday Times today is having this headline, the Sunday Times failed itself. The Sunday Times fails, the Observer failed, and the other titles in Fleet Street have failed and continue to fail, and they will continue to fail. And here is this piece on pages 6 and 7. The Sunday Times, of course, has got the size of the paper. The form is quite rare because there is no other paper apart from the daily bribing Boris graph that has this size. So this is the what is called, used to be the broadsheet size, the old size of the paper. So they got on broadsheet 2 pages, all these victims of police, victims of violence, 79 women killed since Sarah Everard was murdered. And underneath those photographs is this piece by this person called Josh Glancy. He cannot be older than in the late 30s. So he must not be experienced at all about what the police degeneration has been. And that they're carrying this picture of a banner called the Met Police Blood on Your Hands, and a picture of the Dame Cressida Dick, the Met Police Commissioner. They say that she's under pressure to protect women against violence. Now, that's not the case. That is a lie by the Sunday Times. She's not under pressure to protect women at all. She's under pressure to resign because she has been repeatedly under pressure to resign over many things. Now here is this Josh Glancy subheading: the outrage over Sarah Everard's murder raises questions about the lack of credible senior police officers. Now, why is he talking about lack of credible senior officers? I mean, how does the existence of credible senior police officers, or senior credible, what is the phrase? Credible senior police officer, what does it mean? Does it mean, as it can be interpreted to mean, that if there are enough credible senior police officers in posts in any police force, then the existence of non-credible junior police officers who are engaged in crime, in committing crime, plotting crime, does it mean that that is okay? Why I'm saying that? Because policing in the UK is in fact practiced. Policing in UK, the concept of policing in the UK is treated let's say on the day-to-day, treated as above the law, that the police are treated as above the law. Now that should never have been allowed to become acceptable, but that has been acceptable. And all the Fleet Street coverage, the Fleet Street descriptions, let's say immediately they are aware of, and they kind of act as agents, propaganda agents for the police in London's metropolis. And then there is the smaller, very small, numerically smaller kind of force, which is the City of London. The City of London is the City of London that is called the Corporation of London, that corresponds with the financial City of London. And then there are other police forces outside of London. But wherever the police operates in the UK, the police is treated by Fleet Street, by the government, by MPs as above the law. In fact, the most kind of often quoted phrase is police is the law. In other words, people who are policemen and policewomen are treated as being even more entitled to be followed, to be obeyed by members of the public than the letter of the law itself. Now that is something that Peter Hitchens is not. I haven't read the Peter Hitchens piece. I have read the headline. So I'm saying, before I read that, and I'm testing myself, that Peter Hitchens cannot deal with what I'm kind of outlining. And that is because Peter Hitchens himself is a racist and is in denial. And I'll explain why racism is the main issue that makes every agency of the government, every part of the government, not fit for purpose. Every part of the state in the UK, so-called within quotation marks. Racism makes every part of the United Kingdom state, every agency of the UK state, every agency in the UK, not fit for purpose. Why? Because there is a closing of the ranks. Closing of the ranks. One Fleet Street woman journalist who wears a blonde hair, whether it's genuine or not, called Kate McCann. Kate McCann tweeted during the week that she could not quite believe what a former Metropolitan Police woman, a woman of Sikh background, Punjabi background, has said in the wake of the renewed coverage in the media about the trial of the kidnapper and rapist and murderer of Sarah Everard. She said, Kate McCann said, quoting Paramjit Sandhu, that whenever sexual allegations against serving Metropolitan Police men and women were made, then the other Metropolitan Police personnel in post closed ranks to protect the alleged offenders and criminals in the police. And Kate McCann said that she couldn't believe it. Now, Kate McCann is not a senior in chronological years, a senior person. Kate McCann would be, in any case, she would be very clearly aged under 50. And so therefore she would not have been kind of witnessing most of the things that have gone on in this country. She wouldn't have been witnessing a series of scandals involving the London Metropolitan Police in her kind of career. Let's check about her kind of empirical connection with the evidence. The Kate McCann, the name has been quite confusing because it's the name of the mother of the child, Madeleine McCann. So it's the same spelling. And let's see if we can find the different Kate McCann. Is she on the Times, on the Telegraph? So she is described as the senior political correspondent of the Telegraph. I mean, that is the description in the LinkedIn entry. But then there is another one where she is shown as political correspondent of Sky News. She is deputy chair of the Press Gallery, the gathering of political journalists from national and international outlets in Westminster, having previously been chair in 2018. She was only the second woman to hold the title in over 200 years. Now, that is just that description about 200 years and whatever is obviously, she's not at the Telegraph, she's at the Sky News. That is what the Kate E. McCann Twitter account says. And we shall go back to what she says about the police retweeting or quoting Paramjit Sandhu. So on the 30th of September, she tweeted, "Can't quite believe what I just heard on BBC World at 1. Former Met Chief Superintendent Parm Sandhu saying female officers don't always report suspicious behavior of male colleagues because they close ranks and you risk being left to get your head kicked in on duty if you call for help." And then Kate McCann continues, "Hard to know how widespread that feeling is across police forces. But if some female officers don't trust their male colleagues, I mean, what do you do with that?" Now, that is a kind of coffee shop chat, no more than that. That shows that Kate McCann, although she uses the supposed shock, horror, surprise, that she can't believe what she heard on BBC World at 1, that is BBC Radio World at 1, I assume. World at 1, yeah? So let's see what Peter Hitchens, whose piece is normally buried somewhere into the page, into the paper, into the later kind of pages, way after Sarah Vine. Sarah Vine is the person who has been described as being about to get divorced, on the way to be divorced from Michael Gove, who she has been married to for 20 years. So that's Dan Hodges. And Dan Hodges is talking about the liar, Keir Starmer. He's not calling him a liar. I'm calling Starmer a liar. That's the difference. And there is a piece, memoir for Billy Connolly. I'm sure that Peter Hitchens is cited well after that. And there is a piece by column by Piers Moore on himself. So, where is the Hitchens piece? I'm still searching for it. So it's page 31. Peter Hitchens is carried on page 31. Let's see if he's given more than one page. Okay, he's been given one page. So that's Peter Hitchens. That is the kind of historic piece about the police in any Fleet Street paper or any British paper. Okay, so what he's saying, so he claims that 2 years ago, Peter Hitchens, said that the police be disbanded and replaced by something entirely new. And he says, I'm joking even less now. Well, even if he said that the police should be disbanded, and I'm only going to look at it because I believe that although his call for scrapping the police is literally intelligible, I don't believe that he means it. I'm saying that Peter Hitchens doesn't mean it, because Peter Hitchens is a racist, and that is what I said before I came to this particular, literally the particular piece in the Mail on Sunday. I said racism is the clue to the crisis, the British crisis. It's to do with the empire, it's to do with the attitude towards the world outside of Little England, and most importantly, racism at the root of the fundamental sick-making, evil-doing denial. Denial of what? Denial of the truth. And the truth in this context is the truth about the duty that each segment, each part of the what used to be called the UK state owes to the ordinary people. These are not citizens. Remember, check it up. There are no citizens in the UK. These are subjects of Brenda's. No matter how corrupt and how criminal the monarchy is and has been, and how unfit. So let's look at the actual piece that Peter Hitchens says, his headline or byline 2. How does a person such as Wayne Couzens, the kidnapper, the rapist, and the murderer, a known drug user with an unconcealed taste for extreme pornography, become a police officer in the first place? Well, these questions that he is asking after that, they have been asked 1,000 times in the last 6 months. How did he remain one? How is it that when this questionable figure was caught on camera exposing his private parts, nobody even followed it up? Well, this is absolutely correctly raised, correct questions. How has what is to be the most civilized and subtle police force in the world now, that is something that comes straight from his own patriotic stupidity and ignorance. The people in the world never considered the British police as the most civilized and subtle. Brutality, cruelty, persecution, and corruption have always been included in the evidence about the behavior of the police. Whether the mythology around the police is a completely different matter, which is what Peter Hitchens is perpetuating. How has it, at the same time, gained the powers to detain a totally law-abiding woman so that she was not at first suspicious and could be hauled into a car and driven to an awful solitary death? Too horrible to imagine. Absolutely. When we say the phrase the gullibles, that is what we mean. Not Sarah Everard by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. What we mean is an answer to Peter Hitchens' question there. How has it, at the same time, gained the powers to detain a totally law-abiding woman? That is the question, because the gullibles, by whom we mean the people who bought, that is, eagerly kind of agreed with every single lie that the Brexiteers told. Before the referendum in June 2016, and they voted accordingly to take Britain out of the European Union. How has the grisly kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard, he's leaving out her rape, which has so many grim messages for us, been narrowed down by the BBC and many politicians into an issue about the treatment of women? Absolutely. I am as concerned about the treatment of women as anybody, but these dreadful things could equally well have been done to anyone, and they go far wider than that. I'm glad that the Labour MP Harriet Harman is now calling for the resignation of the disastrous Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. But that is only one member of Parliament, a public figure. Let's see the rest of the Peter Hitchens piece, and then we shall, because I think that he's himself intellectually kind of hampered and challenged by his own racist shortcomings and ignorance. But what took you so long, Harriet? Dame Cressida is the very symbol of the useless, politicized modern policing, which does not serve the public, male or female. That is how she got the job. Something tells me you would have been pleased when she did. And then he says, in February 2017, I warned against her appointment on this page. I said, in British public life, nothing succeeds like failure. Provided you belong to the blessed company of the politically correct, I am more interested in whether these people are up to the job, regardless of sex, which is surely the truly anti-sexist position. In October 2019, I wrote here, Britain's biggest police force is now institutionally unjust and so is not fit for the task we have entrusted to it. The report by Sir Richard Henriques into its VIP pedophiles investigation is one of the most devastating ever published about any official body. If any other organization was involved, we would disband it and start again, as I increasingly believe we should do with the police. This horrible mess is closely linked to their failure to control or deal with the crimes they increasingly regard as petty, of theft and disorder. It is so telling that the modern police pursued with chilly, relentless zeal and platoons of constables ludicrous, evidence-free claims made by a wild fantasist that a decorated field marshal had been a pedophile. But faced with real worries that one of their own officers was a serious deviant, they did nothing, 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 nothing. Oh, you say, but we are no longer judgmental about such things. A man must have a private life. Sex workers have a job to do. Pornography is everywhere. Well, maybe we need to go back to being judgmental. I never bought the claim that releasing the liquid manure of pornography into our society was a harmless reform that would make us less repressed and healthier. Rather the contrary, as we see here. I think I can recall a time when a police officer who divorced would suffer in his career. One who was in serious debt would also have been under suspicion. Police officers in those times no doubt had flaws of many kinds, but I do not think a man who was actually known among his colleagues for his taste for violent pornography and drugs would have been hired or retained until quite recently, because the police force upheld laws which also had something to do with the moral order we used to have here. Police constables did not just enforce the laws against violence, theft, and disorder. They believed in them, and so did the public who were their friends. Now the police enforce an entirely new code, which often seems to be mainly concerned with politics. The streets stink of marijuana, vandalism, burglary, car theft, and general disorder proceed unhampered. Yet when the COVID-19 panic arrived, the police turned from patrolling Twitter and enforcing politically correct speech codes and instead suddenly appeared in legions to lecture people for sunbathing, hiking, or having picnics. Cousins, let it never be forgotten, pretended to use COVID powers to get Sarah Everard into his car. Think on these things. I was not joking when I said 2 long years ago that the police should be disbanded and replaced by something entirely new. I'm joking even less now. So this is the piece that I said would not get to the real truth about the policing failures. And Hitchens doesn't actually get to the truth. And I will be diagnosing this further. What is happening with the reputation of the two pieces that he has referred to, his own columns? is that Hitchens is failing to relate to the world. Hitchens is a prisoner of his own kind of racist isolation. When he talks about we, when he talks about society, he doesn't identify which part of the society he's referring to. And when he wonders how these things became acceptable, that Sarah Everard was trusting enough to get into the car. She never got out of alive. And in between those questions is the history of empire. It's not empire in the subcontinent that ended apparently on the 14th and 15th of August, 1947. The empire in the minds of the races. An empire has never left the minds of the races. When I saw Peter Hitchens walking southwards, I was sitting on a bench on a summer day, summer weekday or week. Yes, it must have been a weekday. I was sitting on a bench on the northern bank of the River Thames some years ago. Well, exactly the time when Richard the owner of the Daily Express Group, or owner, sold it to the racist liar. And Peter Hitchens was a columnist on the Daily Express, just like he's writing the column on the Daily Mail Group. He was writing for some years a column for the Daily and Sunday Express, I think. One of the two, but it's the same group. And of course, as part of the investigation into the contents, into the role and the perversity of the Fleet Street, for years I have been reading his piece on the Express Group titles. And I was up to date with my awareness of what would have been the consequence of the racist Dick taking over the Express Group. And I concluded that one of the people who would find it impossible to stay as a writer on the Express Group would be Peter Hitchens. And I was correct. Hitchens surfaced, or was about to be surfacing, as a writer on the Mail Group, because at that time when I saw him and I spoke to him at my initiative, strictly on the basis of the morality of the situation, Hitchens refused to engage in an ordinary conversation with me. And I asked him why he was refusing to have a proper conversation. And he used the term diffident. He said that he was being diffident because he didn't know me. Now, how stupid. I had already given enough references to the pieces that he had written, the items that he had commented on, for him to know that I was an avid and very careful reader. He didn't have to know me, and I didn't have to know him. It was about the morality of the criminal taking over the Beaverbrook titles. Now, dividend, he was saying the modesty or shyness resulting from a lack of self-confidence. So he was admitting that he was being shy because he had got lack of confidence in himself about conducting an intelligent, objective level conversation. And it was about the core of Fleet Street, the role of the Fleet Street. That's what I was interested in talking to him about, but he didn't want to continue the conversation. So when faced with the challenge of the evidence-based conversation that I had attempted to have with him, Hitchens showed his lack of confidence in himself. So this is the guy who is now writing about the whole future of the police and the past of the police and the role of the police without saying a single thing about the police. I mean, he is repeating some factual references to Sarah Everard, but he's not talking about what Kate McCann tweeted about Paramjit Sandhu. Now, Paramjit Sandhu, as I say, she's a woman of Sikh, Punjabi Sikh origin. She may have been born in this country. Let's see if there is an entry on Paramjit Sandhu. It is quite possible that Paramjit Sandhu would have been born here in the UK. But she's definitely of Sikh Punjabi origin. And she's a person who has been in the kind of she has, I think, I'm looking for the book that she may have written. Well, this name, Paramjit Sandhu, is quite a well-known name in the Sikh. There are quite a few people. It's not possible to locate any entry, biographical entry about her, but this name, Paramjit Sandhu or Pam Sandhu, is a Sikh name for both men and women. Of course, it is well known in India. And there are many with the same name in North America. And the fact that Peter Hitchens fails to actually engage with the evidence about racism and corruption is not an accident. Corruption and racism are very much at the foundation of the badness that is this society. The evildoers are now controlling. The evildoers are controlling the means of brainwashing. Hitchens asked the question, how did it end up being the position about the police and the public, that there is no policing and that somebody could actually end up being, well, he didn't say the word or concept rape, but he should have said that, but he meant the whole package, that she was kidnapped, raped and murdered by the police. How did that descend into this position? Well, he didn't use the term descent, but that is what he meant. And I'm saying that long before I've been arguing on the evidence, I have no agenda because I don't have an agenda in the sense that I want to become a replacement for somebody else in some career. My task has always been and is and will be to tell the truth on the evidence. And that has got a well-known list of kind of prices. There is no cooperation from the absolute majority of the people in the population, and most certainly not any cooperation from various people in various careers, whose careers are about upholding morality and ethics. So it's a very challenging task to diagnose morality or morally diagnose, ethically diagnose the conduct of the agencies like the police and other agencies in society, in the state. And as the evidence shows, the expression, the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is not done by anyone else. Not just about Fleet Street, but nobody else nobody in the North America, the whole continent, nobody is doing what I'm doing. Nobody is doing this or any part of it in Canada or in Australia or New Zealand. Why Canada, Australia, and New Zealand? Because English-speaking kind of parts of the world, imperial parts of the world. North America is racist because it is imperialistic. Canada is racist because it is imperialistic. Huge chunks of the so-called independent South Africa is still part of the racist, imperialist control of everything. Same with New Zealand, same with Australia. So the problem with the police in this country is that the police are not seen as a power above the ordinary people. The police are seen as friends of the ordinary people, which is, friends is the concept that Hitchens has used. He has not explained it, but that is an accurate reference. Friends. Policing with the consent of the people. It has never been policing with the consent of the people in Brixton, in Bristol, in Liverpool, in Southall, in London, most of London. Policing is not done with the consent of the police, the ordinary people. There is no dialogue, not even 1/10 of the actual reality. There is no dialogue between the police and the community. Now, various times they say 192 years, some say 190 years of the police, whether it's 190 or 192 years, there has been no real dialogue with the public by the police, and the police are not accountable. The structure is anti-accountability. And the reason why Peter Hitchens, we call him racist in his piece in the Mail on Sunday today, and also in the previous pieces that he refers to, 2017, 2019. Because if the police were accountable to the communities, then the accountability exercise, the process of accountability would necessarily include the police conduct at every level. I mean, we're talking about domestic policing. And if the police conduct at every level were examined, openly scrutinized by the communities, then the rigor of examining, in other words, vetting, with the term the vetting, that how did this person with so many weaknesses and character flaws and unfitness for purpose get included in the recruitment process and was allowed to remain in active employment as a police person. Those weaknesses and those defects would have been flagged up and highlighted, and if honestly done, if ethically done, if morally done, if honestly done, and if genuinely anti-racistly done, then that kind of process would ensure that the overwhelming majority of recruitment and maintenance of police personnel would have been free of criminals. But there is no accountability. So as the American writer about the 1950s state of East Pakistan wrote, that he visited. I've said this before, and it's worth repeating. He was commissioned, or he was asked to write a piece about East Pakistan or Pakistan, whatever. But this particular piece or comment I'm going to referred to East Pakistan. And when the man observed the various officials, the various institutions, various activities in the population in the province of East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, the man saw a persistent recurrence of dishonesty as he encountered. Persistent recurrence of dishonesty, incompetence, and lack of rigor, in my words. Remember, I'm talking some decades later, 60 plus years later. So the guy found that the people were, on the whole, individually unreliable, incompetent, ignorant, bad at their jobs, and the list went on. So he asked the question himself. He said, so how does this part of the country run? How does it function? That is the key concept, function. And he said, all these people being so unreliable, incompetent, ignorant, and all the rest of it, a country should not be functioning. But the fact that it does function proves that there must be a God. He did say that. Well, I'm not quoting, but I'm paraphrasing from memory. So if the police in this country are as bad as today's papers are acknowledging, and yet there is a police force in London, or there are police forces in the country, that there must be a God somewhere. Because without God, the police should not be functioning at all. Think about that. Now, this guy, Hitchens, says, the last paragraph, yes, think on these things. I was not joking when I said 2 long years ago that the police should be disbanded and replaced by something entirely new. I'm joking even less now. This is the piece I'm talking about, Peter Hitchens, on the Mail on Sunday, page 31. And this is one of the London print editions. So we'll come back to Peter Hitchens again because of the central relevance of the issues. Now he's now also talking about Angela Rayner. He says, so now we know what I did not realize before. Angela Rayner, deputy leader of the Labour Party, smokes cigarettes. So what, you might say? Many people smoke. Well, so quite a lot. Because Miss Rayner has been one of the political class who joined in a solid block to lecture us about our health and protecting the NHS. I believe pictures also exist of a smoking Michael Gove, Minister for Concreting over the country. Wear masks, they said. Stay at home, they said. Their belief that public health and the NHS were the overriding concern of government closed businesses, wrecked educations, he says, and as we are slowly learning, wounded the economy very deeply indeed. We were, in short, asked to make major long-term sacrifices for the general good, involving self-restraint. No sentient being in this country, no sentient being in this country does not realize by now that cigarettes are bad for you. May well kill you and are almost certain to subject you to very severe chronic disease. Can you smoke and support our NHS? Not really. I don't think that you can smoke and support policies which ask others to make sacrifices you aren't prepared to make. I think Miss Rayner and Mr. Gove know this too. That is why such pictures are very rare. Harold Wilson, who actually preferred cigars, smoked a pipe in public in the 1960s. So did Tony Benn. More recently than that, Kenneth Clark was often seen with a cigar. Even Neil Kinnock had a public pipe smoking phrase. But as governments interfered more and more with our private lives, our leaders began to keep their dirty habits secret. There are few, if any, genuine pictures of Barack Obama, once a keen smoker, actually smoking. And David Cameron was not outed until after he left office. They knew, you see, that modern left-wing policies and smoking just don't go together. I agree with them. I leave it to them to decide which one to give up. And he says in the heading, so will Angela give up cigarettes or politics? Well, he is meaning what he calls left-wing politics. Now, going back to his article about the police, now he's saying that Peter Hitchens is saying that the kidnapper and rapist and murderer of Sarah Everard used the COVID codes, COVID-19 codes to entrap her and to lure her or sub-lure her into his car for the last journey she ever took on this planet, alive. Now, Peter Hitchens has got, as I said, he's got, his mind is set. Peter Hitchens once wrote a piece about Iran. And surprisingly, he praised the people of Iran. And more importantly, he praised the fact that they looked more like the Europeans because of their skin pigmentation than what he meant other Muslims did. because Muslims are demographically the most dominant in terms of faith in that region. So it's the Middle East. But the Iranians are not counted as Middle Eastern. Iranians are counted as uniquely kind of descended from their own history, unlike neighboring countries to the east or to the west or to the north. And Hitchens actually praised the Iranians' culture in many respects. And he, as he would use the word, chided his co-journalists or co-commentators who derided Iran without hesitation. So Peter Hitchens does know some of the things and does admit some of the things, unlike others in Fleet Street, about the racist, imperialist outlook. He does know that and he does admit that. But that doesn't make him any less racist, because all the Fleet Street so-called newspapers and all the mainstream broadcasting outlets, radio, television, in Little England are manned and womaned by white people, or the white people predominantly man and woman the media. They present them, they edit them, they script them, and they set the narrative. And they are accompanied by people like in the police, say for example, the Paramjit Sandhu. So long as there can be these people who descend from African and Asian backgrounds, so long as these recruits can be exhibited as diversity displays. The diversity displays means that people of African and Asian origin are never able to decide the narrative, decide the actual contents and the agenda. So they are just that, exhibits. The Daily Mail, I think on Saturday, published a piece about the very Hindu descended Rishi Sunak, who is in post as Boris Johnson's cabinet's finance minister, otherwise known as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And Rishi Sunak is being kind of positioned against Angela Rayner by him being quoted as saying that he doesn't think that he is a conservative. As a conservative, he is a racist scum. Now there is the evidence of a complete, absolute nephew Tom at work. He's not old enough to be called Uncle Tom, so let's say he's a nephew Tom, this Rishi Sunak. He is a diversity exhibit. He is not a real conservative. The real conservatives are the ones that Angela Rayner called scum, not the likes of Rishi Sunak, not the likes of the stupid Kashmir originated conservative MP, also known as a licensed law trader, nor a number of other conservatives from the subcontinent, Goa and India mainland origin, or indeed Priti Patel. These are exhibits, ethnicity exhibits. These are diversity exhibits. And because the conservatives run a business, it's not a political, ideological movement, it's a business. It's a corrupt business and a corrupt enterprise, but it is a business. This is why they don't see anything wrong, and they never saw anything wrong in Margaret Thatcher's denial of the existence of society. She said there is no such thing as society. And there was no uproar in the Conservative Party. And there was most certainly no uproar in the Fleet Street criminals, so-called media. Why? Because the Conservatives are a party in business, fleecing customers. There is a difference between customers and society. When you recognize society, you don't fleece them. You don't fleece a community of people, a population that you actually recognize the existence of as made up by very real human beings with rights, expectations, entitlements, and so on. Now, you cannot do the business of fleecing them if you then recognize their rights and their entitlements and help them as human beings with compassion, with dedication, with recognition of human rights, which is why there is no such thing as society goes with greed is good, Boris Johnson. And Theresa May's launch into the politics, front bench politics, at the beginning of this century, by staging. Theresa May staged it. She didn't admit it, but she staged an admission that the Conservatives were a nasty party. She got the headlines. And off she went. A business woman doing conservative politics by staging a shop, staging a parade so that people would come to her stall and seek out her custom, her goodies. And off she went, and she reached the post eventually of being at number 10 Downing Street. That is what she was hopefully aiming for. And she was, despite the fact that she staged the confession by appearing to condemn the rest of the Conservative Party as being unfit for purpose because people saw it as the nasty party. While she did that, she got into the front bench eventually through that launch. She then embarked on being nasty herself. Hostile environment. So that is, as I said, racism. Her main achievement at the UK Interior Ministry, that is Home Office, was marked by her issuing directives to create a hostile environment people of African, Caribbean, Asian origins. So what does it mean in terms of Peter Hitchens saying that the police should be scrapped? It means that he doesn't refer to the police in terms of the encounters the police, Metropolitan Police have had with people in these events, especially people from the African background or African descent via the Caribbean, let's say Bristol, Brixton, Merseyside, Liverpool, Toxteth. All happened in 1981. And no such confrontation took place between the British police and any part of the population other than the population coming from African background mainly in these contexts. Even the police being told to mount serious physical assault and violence against the mine workers under the order of Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. After the 1981 Bristol, Brixton, Merseyside, Toxteth, quote, riots. Those confrontations between the mine workers and the police didn't receive anything like the shock, horror, high-octane coverage in the Fleet Street media and the British media. What am I saying? Am I saying that the key to understanding the police, the key to understanding the police in this country lies in the evidence of the British state as empire in deploying the forces of policing, mainly made up of people from the occupied territories. The politics and the policies and the agenda and the ethos and the morality or the stand or the status of policing in the context of morality are to be found in what the British Empire Imperial Police did in Africa and in the subcontinent, what is now Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. And for shorter period in Burma. There has been no auditing of the policing of empires, British empires. And the British state, which controlled the empire, inherited, continued, carried on, and carried forward and brought forward the attitude of the British state, the Empire State, to the subjects. And that attitude is based on contempt, not respect, not deference, not seeking the consent, but of contempt. When you look at photographs of police people in London, let's say, police, because it doesn't happen now, but it happened decades ago. When you take pictures of, or look at pictures of police persons walking on the streets of London, you don't see the overwhelming majority, if not all the pictures, show segregated policing. There is hardly any black-skinned or Asian-skinned police personnel in the police walking. What does it mean? It means that the normalization of segregation of the police has been accepted by even the likes of Tower Hamlets Council, which had for several years imposed a person, a councillor called Ohid Ahmed. Ohid Ahmed indulged in a number of stunts, declaring that he was going to visit one part of the borough of Tower Hamlets or another, accompanied by serving police persons. These police persons were not police persons from African or Asian backgrounds. These are all people of white race or racial background. And the normalization of such segregated composition of the police in Tower Hamlets is proof that even somebody with a name like Ohid Ahmed, who was imposed as an elected councillor, didn't bat an eyelid. It didn't occur to him to examine the composition of the police, and so on. Not that the policing in Tower Hamlets was being done to the standard required. I'm talking about the actual role of the elected post holder, such as this person called Ohid Ahmed, who was the advertised as community safety councillor in the so-called cabinet of the holder of the corrupt mayor post, Lutfur Rahman. So at the local level, there is no question about the real representation of the whole population or reflection of the population in the composition of the police at borough level in the London metropolis. There was no question. There has been no question. No councillor in Tower Hamlets has actually raised the questions about policing. Not even after token protests about police arrest of individuals such as happened 2-3 years ago in a place called Eberfeldy Street. Coincidentally, the very street where Wahid Ahmad himself has his house. Not a councillor anymore, but his house was there. So there was a so-called protest against the police behavior, a protest that I found myself attending in the Victoria Park Square. And I even gave a spiel. And despite the fact that I have asked for updates from those who organized the so-called protest about police behavior, there has been no updates sent to me, no acknowledgement of my queries, no acknowledgement of the interest that I have shown in being informed about the progress, if any, in the campaign to hold the police accountable for that particular behavior. Throughout the calendar years that Lutfur Rahman in Tower Hamlets in London's East End was in post as an incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor. Lutfur Rahman didn't raise any question about policing, about the composition of the police, about the role of the police. Not even when the schoolboy Ajmal Ahmad was murdered by fellow schoolboys near Langdon Park School in Poplar. What were the police doing to safeguard the children, safeguard the likes of Ajmal Ahmad? What was the local elected, so-called elected Bara of Tower Hamlets Council doing in providing safeguarding to the children, including Ajmal Ahmad? This question of safeguarding became even more urgent after it was reported in the mainstream media in February 2015 that 3 Bethnal Green schoolgirls had left the UK on their way to join apparent jihadi fighters in Syria. Who raised the questions? Any elected councillor? Any of the 2 MPs at the time? No. Did the incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor, Lutfur Rahman, raise the question? The answer is no. It's the Khoodeelaar campaign, the campaign that is bringing this broadcast to you, that raised the question, and we have been raising this question ever since. Neither Fleet Street nor the so-called local press, also known as the East London Idiotizer, has recorded that fact. And the police have not prosecuted anyone about the crimes committed against the people of Tar Hamlets by the elected mayor, corrupt elected mayor post holder during the 5 years. And the fact that there were crimes committed are on the record. Crimes, misconduct, abuse. So this being the Baby Angel Geronimo edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign television channel, the behavior of Tar Hamlets Council and the behavior of Newham Council, the behavior of Lewisham Council, the behavior of the post holder in the corrupt post of mayor at the expense of London, Sadiq Khan, in relation to the police at every level, shows that the police themselves have abandoned, abolished, scrapped, done away with the concept of policing in safeguarding people, protecting people from crime. So it's not Peter Hitchens who is making a historic comment at all, because he's not referring to the behavior of the police on the street, the behavior of the police in scrapping most crimes from the list of crimes, and the role of the police in hiding, concealing thousands and thousands of crimes. Hitchens is not talking about the role of the Sheffield City Council in destroying trees in the city and abusing the council's powers to unleash violent attacks by police on protectors and defenders of the trees in Sheffield. Hitchens is not talking about the Scarman report, which condemned the police. Hitchens is not talking about the role of the police in covering up the murder of the Welsh investigator, and the inquiry decades later condemned the Metropolitan Police as being rotten and corrupt to the core. So these are not accidental omissions by Peter Hitchens, who pretends to be the dissident voice. He told me that he was being diffident to me. He's lacking experience, lacking confidence in himself, as against my questions. He's not only diffident, but he's being dishonest, because he's actually staying clear of the facts of the police behavior day to day. And the police behavior vis-a-vis most of the people that find themselves in contact with the police shows that the police are leaving most crimes unattended. For example, in the case of the abuse of the COVID-19 kind of rules, this is an example of the flouting of the law. and the flouters are being allowed to stay free, not acted on, not arrested, not prosecuted. So if you extrapolate that and take to the parts of the government, including the Home Office, the behavior of the Home Office, the behavior of the depraved DEFRA, that for 4 years has been confecting and conspiring, confecting lies and conspiring untruths, conspiring to commit crimes against the most innocent baby angel Geronimo. There has been no inquiry. So at every level, there are crimes being committed by state and state agencies, departments of the government, and the police are not prosecuting. So Peter Hitchens says that the police should be suspended or disbanded. Disbanded is the word he's using in the copy, and the scrap. And scrapping the police and start again, that is in the headline. Most people who are victims of crime know that there is no police. It's not that there is no police in view in the streets. 3 women have been murdered. Well, in the streets, one woman was the one that in South London, woman police in a community, what is it called? Community support officer. She was out walking with her dog and she was murdered. And as we have said, we are still observing what is going on procedurally about the action that need to be taken after the murder of SABINA NESSA. So we are not commenting on the various bits and pieces that have been in the news in the last 24 hours or previously. But she was, according to the kind of PA, that is Press Association Media copy, being repeated by various outlets, she was the victim of a premeditated murder. By a predatory murderer in the street. And as we have said, Sadiq Khan is not fit for purpose. Sadiq Khan has not made any comment about the lack of safety in the streets. It's a murderous lack of safety for the victims. And the fact that Sadiq Khan has been silent has not been in any significant, noticeable way treated as a serious failing, a lethal failing by the incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor in the name of London. No outcry among the MPs, no outcry at the Labour Party conference just held, and there is not going to be any outcry by the Conservatives, whose conference in Manchester is underway now. Whatever Priti Patel has said, she has said as a stooge of the racists, and Rishi Sunak has said the same thing about Angela Rayner as a stooge. And neither Rishi Sunak nor Priti Patel nor any of the other right-wing stooges with Asian background or Indian background or Pakistani background or Afghan background in the Conservative Party as members of parliament, none of them has said anything. The only person who has actually made a statement which we have tweeted about is Viera Baird. Now, Viera Baird is supposed to be the crime commissioner. Viera Baird is a careerist. She's a licensed law trader, and she fancies herself as the dame. She is not a campaigner by any kind of stretch. Now, the Sun on Sunday is running this one about this kidnapper, rapist, and murderer of Sarah Everard. Now, this is too shocking to be even commented on. How did he do that? How did he get into the policing, and how did he stay there? And there was a news item yesterday, Saturday, that for 3 months after being arrested for kidnapping and raping and murdering Sarah, he was being paid full salary. And what this Sun on Sunday is saying that the toxic culture must end. Well, that is a completely irresponsible and criminally negligent kind of demand. The demand is that the police don't exist. The truth is that the police don't exist. And they're saying, this scum is saying that migrants would be sent to Albania. We'll come to that in due course, not in this. And they're saying that Sarah's kidnapper and rapist and murderer is an actual serial killer. That's a new question that may be followed up. But the role of the Fleet Street papers in running a piece like that is that the star on Sunday is being creepy rather than investigative and campaigning. How did he get away? If he got away, then that proves that the police don't exist. And what the Bieber Brooks legacy of lying for Boris Johnson does is lies for Johnson again. Just as Johnson has been lying along with depraved DEFRA against baby angel Geronimo, exactly George Injustice is the only cabinet minister who is saying the same thing as Boris Johnson. While everybody else is saying that the crisis is getting worse, Boris Johnson is in denial. Not only is Boris Johnson in denial, according to the front page of the Mail on Sunday, he's targeting the wrong people, the campaigners for climate change. He's not bothered about the murderous police. He's saying that he will lock up campaigners for climate change. And this former murder squad detective, Steve Williams, whose daughter Georgia was murdered by a criminal called Reynolds, is quoted as saying, with regard to police discipline, the whole system needs sorting from top to bottom. And he continues, police are too protected by legislation and discipline rules that allow incompetence to run rife throughout the force. Officers should be vetted every few years to keep up with any change in the behavior and performance. Concerns should be addressed immediately. There should be no exceptions because you are a member of the club. And he said that victims' families should have rights when it comes to offenders, such as a right to appeal on decisions taken in court or by officials. He said their suffering cannot be put into words. Absolutely. Now, this is the Khoodeelaar campaign, and we are broadcasting only on the internet. This campaign theme is headed by Baby Angel Geronimo editions, and we are including as updates on the Sarah Everard and SABINA NESSA murders. And we are going to continue in the next part. This is probably around or just after 2 hours. This edition has been on for just over 2 hours. So we shall end this part A at this